about it. And some people not only write about it, they are change agents. We're talking with Fraser Clark. We could say an old friend of mine from England, where he has, well, you were really one of the people that were on the basis of the alternative movement in the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah, never stopped.
You are in a way comparable with Werner Pieper in Germany and a little bit with Tim Leary in...
The ecstasy Tim Leary, they call me in the UK, so...
You have, like Tim, you kept very active, and not only were you active in the 60s and the 70s, but for the last 10 years you've been active in the rave scene.
Yeah, right.
And you were one of the people that came up with the concept of zippies, which means?
Balanced techno-Persian hemisphere with your hippie hemisphere.
But what does the acronym means? Zen.
It was. It came from. It's not anything special. It came from. We were looking for 90s hippies, and then we go zippies, 90s zippies. And it came that way. Nothing special. It's because Zen-inspired pagan professionals and so on. It's had various names given to it. But I was just looking for a word that was zippier than hippie, to get a 90s balanced hippie techno person, you know, techno.
But that word got you into Wired in a big way, and Wired made it a cover story, Zippies, that brought you to the States, and you actually did for a while a house rave disco.
We did raves across the country, coast to coast, a lot of media, which was the main thing really, it was the media. And then we did a club, Megatropolis, San Francisco, for a while. And then we stopped and we did a lot of stuff on the internet at that time. We had a whole Zippy channel and we kind of took on America. Whoa. I've been looking at some of that stuff recently, it's amazing.
This was also in connection with Woodstock, 30 years.
That was the 30th anniversary, yeah. And they were looking for the new Woodstock and nobody thought it would be at the old rock and roll place. So we were kind of hyped up as being the real Woodstock, the underground one, the one that didn't have paid bands and all that. And it was. We ended up with about 10,000 people, 2 TP circles, a rave for 3 days and nights in the middle of the National Forest near the Grand Canyon. So
it wasn't too bad.
It was like putting on a rave here, but Americans didn't really understand it. They kept saying, well, how much is it, and what day is it exactly, and where is it? And we'd say, no, man, just get to the general area, keep your ears open, talk to the right people, you'll find it.
A bit of a rainbow.
Maybe it's a week late, maybe it's a week early, but, you know, you know, which is how things operate here. Yeah. But of course America was like, I wanted to do a project that was as far away from a business plan as you could possibly imagine, because what does the world need more than anything? You know, something huge, gigantic, but no business plan.
Fraser, you have tried a few businesses in your lifetime, haven't you? One of the first was the Encyclopedia Psychedelica.
Yeah, none of them were, well, that wasn't started as a business, that was something that had to be done. I just felt that had to be done, somebody has to raise the ban, and this was like the beginning of the 80s, when the whole planet was disappearing down the plug hole and nobody seemed to give a shit. You know?
And you made a magazine which was really, you know, bits and pieces of information together, making the encyclopedia, and you made 11 issues or something?
15
issues?
Quarterly issues, yeah.
And some of them were still stacked away at a printer shop somewhere in England?
Under my bed. I got a few in my back pocket here.
yeah. We had a few of them at Ego Software.
Yeah, I remember you picking them up one time in your many travels through.
Yes, because at one time the two of us met with, was it Terence McKenna?
We met down at the Tertalogs at the edge of history. What was it?
Yeah.
Trilogues at the edge of somewhere.
With Terence and who was there?
And Sheldrake,
Rupert Sheldrake. Yeah.
And Steve Abrahams.
Yes. And then we were trying to go to the big festival at what was it? With the hill.
Remember.
You know, there was just a few days.
You mean Stonehenge?
No, the Glastonbury Festival.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. I don't remember.
I did get there, yes.
You got there? I think I got there too, I don't remember.
Yeah. It was amazing. How many people? 400,000 people or something like that?
Nobody knows.
And all the hills were filled with cars
it's like
and
a city.
tents.
It's like a city, yeah.
It was like a city.
First time I ever went to Stonehenge Festival, I've been travelling all through I was a kind of global hippie, you know. But when I came back to England to begin settling down, I thought the only way I can stand living in the city again is go to the festival. So I went down to Stonehenge for the first time and I came over the hill and I was expecting, I don't know, maybe 3 big free food tents and half a dozen trucks and maybe a teepee. That's what I was expecting. You come over the hill and it's like the Indian nation reaching as far as the goddamn horizons, and you think, wow, you know. And you drive.
Things happen.
Yeah, I remember there's a big sign over Stonehenge that said, it's never too late to have a happy childhood, right? And you drove in and you kind of pull your car up and you're waiting for some official to come forward and say, you know, you're X19, nobody comes, and you thought, wow, this is just happens, you know. And it worked, you know, it was an organic thing that appeared out of nowhere, lasted for about 3 weeks and then just disappeared again. And while it was there, I mean, that's why it was stopped, really. It just showed if you don't have the authorities we have now and the people just come together, it actually works. They work it out.
But the authorities don't like that.
They don't like us to see that. That's a demonstration that we don't actually need. I mean, once people start to realise that the enemy, I mean, society is supposed to be protecting us from the enemy, but that isn't. When people realise the enemy is the very society, the man who's always after your taxis, always after, you know, you can't do that, you can't do that. The enemy is the guy who's saying he's protecting you from the enemy. I mean,
Fraser, you're a revolutionary, and
Evolutionary.
that's fine. And you're banding. You've through time met all the other tribal members of this group of change agents. And at times we had fun, didn't we?
Oh yeah, it's always fun. Yeah. When you remember, it's fun. You know, you have to remember. You get so busy. I'm sure you get this. You're so busy.
I remember one night sleeping at your place, which was, let's say, a bit of a mess. And then in the middle of the night, an old friend, the lady came in, and there were frightening things there. Come to today. You're now the editor of High Life.
High Life,
which is an English language magazine about...
well, it's Dutch and German, and now they're opening the English version. I mean, they've been going in Holland for about 6 years, as far as I can work out.
And you're now the editor-in-chief of the magazine?
Of the English version, of the international edition, yeah.
So that means you're now traveling around the world, trying to find the scoops and the good stories about marijuana, cannabis?
Yeah, contact me. If you got a good story. It doesn't have to be drugs. I mean, I said to them, if it's all drugs, I'm not interested. But if it's about 50-50 drugs and 50-50 sort of high things that high people get into, which can cover anything, then I'm into that, and that's what they've agreed.
So you're looking for...
So it's a kind of global culture magazine, you know, with quite a strong emphasis on drugs, because that's what I find global cultural people have, quite a strong emphasis on drugs. So I think that's about the right balance.
And it's very funny. Today we had here, well, last Friday I met Deepak Chopra, and this morning we had Philip Glass, and all those people, one way or another, admit that they have taken LSD and that it opened their eyes and whatever. The funny thing is that as they have progressed in society and have now a responsible position, they will not say, you know, go take it, but say, yeah, maybe it's not the way. But, you know, they all took it. It was
I agree with you.
eye-opener.
We talked about this yesterday, and I agree with you, what you were saying about that. I think this is the story of the whole fuck-up, isn't it? We go through your youth, your idealism, and then you stop being an idealist, and you turn and become more conservative, and then you start telling the young people not to do what you did. You know,
and they won't believe you because you're lying.
And then they realise you become an old fart. You're exactly the kind of person, authority figure they don't want to listen to. I mean, the kids can see through that, you know.
Yeah, but then what happens then is that we are old farts. So
no, we don't have
age?
to be. I'm 53.
Well, we are not in the prime of...
I just came from the global chillies. Don't tell me I'm an old fart. I could just be hanging out in the global chillies all afternoon.
You are a 60s person who's still around in the 90s.
I'm a 90s person now, though. You know, I am. I mean, I know all the young ravers. I go to the clubs. I've run clubs, and I do... Yeah,
that's what you did in England. You had a club called Megatropolis. Megatropolis, which is a slight difference from Megatropolis. Megatropolis. And that was how many people would come there for?
Yeah, well, it started, it was never, between 1,500 and 2,500 people every Thursday. That wasn't even Friday. That was Thursday, you know.
Well, let's talk about techno. Techno started, according to some, in Chicago, in the States, went to Germany. The Germans claimed they invented it. Then it became the rave scene, the techno rave scene.
Okay.
House parties came from the psychedelic side, from the ecstasy side. What role did England play with the development of that?
England was the key thing. England was what put the different bits together and created rave culture. You had sort of technical things came from Chicago, kind of musical, technical things. But to me, that was just, and that's not important.
Oh, that was more the beat. That
was the beat, a certain way of working in the studio, a certain idea of mixing and so on. Then that was taken by some kids from London to Ibiza, which is party island. You know, I mean, I'm not really a club person, even though I've spent the last 5 years of my life in clubs and running clubs. Before that, I was travelling hippie. The only time I was ever into clubs before was in Ibiza in the 60s. Because in Ibiza in the 60s, you go through 6 clubs all on one street, pop into, very small, you know, like a quarter the size of the studio. And you go do 6 different clubs, and that way it was fun, and we were hippies who lived there all the year round, so we knew all the club owners, and that was the only time I was really into clubs. So that was the party element. That was added to the Chicago techno thing. They took that and added, you know, girls having orgasmic sounds or ruffling piano bits or vocals.
The VJs thing, was it there too? The video jockeys.
Video jockeying? Probably not at that time, I would guess. I mean, I wasn't there at
That's
that
what
time.
some of the Germans, Peter Rubin in Germany with William, and some people that did the May Day, big house parties.
That was big, but I'm talking about at the very beginning. I mean, it didn't get big until it went back to London, and then it became big that winter. You see, I'm talking about the bits that came together underground before, and then you put them all together.
What was the magic formula that made that happen?
Well, it was the techno thing from the kind of music from Chicago. It was that party thing that you got from the Ibiza DJs and people who were going to all those clubs, and you know, you get a sort of style, a laid-back thing, and how to make a, you know, and then the ecstasy was added, and that all came together in like the Shum Club and a few other. I mean, there was other influences from Northern Soul coming down from the north. You could argue all night about where it actually came from, but what's important is when it became a culture rather than just an item of something. It's a bit like what your difference between information and data.
Yeah.
Data at a certain point, someone or it organises itself and it becomes a phenomenon, and people start. In this case, it became a culture.
It gets energy basically. It becomes something.
A culture, and then see what was it? What
But why was England so special? Was it because of the travellers, the people that had a more of a tribal culture already?
That's later. I mean, house music, acid house was just what we just said. Then later, it didn't go beyond a certain point. It sort of was okay. So you had the music now, you had the occasional, you had ecstasy, you had dancing all night, you had certain fashion things, but that only goes so far. Then when it started to cross over with the traveller hippie types, there came a point where the Thatcher government was trying to stop the raves. You know, they sensed somewhere in their gut. You know, the dinosaurs, they don't want to get wiped out. They have a big danger thing, and they could just sense something that irritated them in the young people. You know, why are they all getting together and doing this? And you know, it looks too powerful. You know, I mean, my picture of history is that the whole hippie thing in the '60s scared the shit out of the authorities. It had never occurred to them that a youth thing could be picked up by the elders and spread right across society and eventually throw them out. It came very close. And so they've done nothing but black propaganda about it ever since. You ever hear a good word? I mean, why do politicians in England still go on about how terrible the '60s were? Why? It's 40 years ago. Why are they so scared of it? Well, that's why, you know. So they're very aware of youth.
It's funny that today we had this interview with this guy that wrote a book, Wisdom's More, about, well, it's a fiction book, but it says that it claims, kind of corroborates, that the CIA planted LSD to defuse a revolution that they felt was coming because of demographics, and they felt that there was something going to happen bad, well, and that's why they planted LSD.
That was the biggest mistake the CIA ever made.
Well, it's only a fantasy book, it's a fiction book.
Yeah, I see.
The idea is there that the same thing, that sometimes the government gets so afraid. But now we're in Holland, and you see nearly the other way around, apart from the French influence, and they are, you know, you could say that Chirac is really trying to cover up his mistakes with his kids or something.
What is this true story about Chirac? I was mentioning this today. He's got some junkie in the family somewhere or something?
Yeah,
overcompensating
his daughter, yes.
His daughter? Actually, his daughter?
No, they're
his daughter's daughter
or something close. A son or a daughter.
So
and,
he's overcompensating.
He's overcompensating.
For his problem, right.
But on the other hand, the Dutch have been fairly free. At the moment, one could say that the Germans, of course, are more free in some respects as far as morale. But now, at the moment, Amsterdam is full of paddo's. You've heard the word? Take it to England, paddo. You know where it comes from? Toadstool. The word of toadstool is paddenstoel. Paddenstoel. So the word is paddo, which means what you used to call.
I was sitting in the coffee shop today, one of the hipper ones, and this beautiful young Japanese girl came in, maybe 20, 19, and she talked to the guy I was talking to, and she was beautiful. And after she only stayed a little, she was apologising for not staying. She'd kind of come in to apologise for not being there. And after she'd gone, he was saying, "What a dream she is." He says, "I call her the goddess of song or something." And the secret of her, and then he said, she came here and she started taking paddles. And he says, "Isn't it wonderful? Because they're so safe, despite what you say, and it's actually giving people a spiritual. I mean, her life has changed."
Yeah, but this is the good part. This is what we all saw in psychedelics and drugs. And what I understood from people who work with even heroin and other, what we call hard drugs, that their purpose is also a spiritual need, seeking
No,
another.
I don't think so. No, I don't think people who take narcotics are.
Mhm.
They're in pain. I mean, the narcotics people only they're only interesting if you're in pain. I mean, try them.
Mhm.
All they do is remove pain and make you feel slightly nauseous. I mean, that's boring to anyone who's not in a lot of pain, psychological. Or
But then the
physical.
other side, the psychedelics, the tryptamines, the whatever we have these days, DMT, ayahuasca, podos, they allow you a glimpse over the hill.
Mhm.
On the other hand, do you think it's a good idea if the half of the population of Amsterdam would be sitting goggle-eyed and seeing God?
I think if the whole planet was doing that for a while, you know, I think it's a natural phenomenon that would repress.
Yeah, but that
them.
sounds like Tim Leary, who said in the 60s, hey, come on, guys, drop acid and do it.
Except I'm not predicting it's going to happen. I'm just saying the planet might be saved. I mean, in fact, when you turn it the other way around and look at the mess the planet's in and how long we've got left, and think what would have the power, what kind of movement, what kind of social ideas or whatever could possibly change so many people's opinion radically, very radically, in a very short time, and you come up with...
Yeah, but that was the same idea in the 60s.
Shamanic power things are the only things available. I can't think of anything else. Maybe any technology
But
coming
then
up.
the other question is, how many people out of what happened in the 60s, where massive amount of, of trips were distributed at colleges and universities. I'm sure that, say, Clinton took it, and Gore took it, no doubt about it. You couldn't escape it in those days. What did they learn? What have they learned now? Do we live in a better world, or are they...
No, they're just coming to power now. I mean, the 60s generation are just coming into their full power now. So as the planet went on, the hippies took all the drugs and looked at the world and said, this planet is fucked. Seriously, we don't change things fundamentally in the next very few years, we are finished. Now it's 30 years later, and everything they said is coming true. Now the planet really is. I mean, we're poisoning us every time you breathe, you drink water, you food, everything, cows, everything the hippies said is now coming home to roost, and now we're in the final stages of this battle, really, is what I'm thinking. The fact that a whole new generation, the rave generation, is starting to take these shamanic drugs and have these visions, and the numbers are growing, is about the only hope I see for this planet.
Well, that's nice. How come there is a generation in between, what I call the X generation, the people that just were too old for the raves? They lost out.
They got the punk thing, which is at least it was energy. I mean, it was a bit negative and self-defeating. You know, all they did was reject. They had no concept of an answer. You know.
But it's funny that people like you have far more of a link with the younger generation, the new breed, as the people that are now young and experiment with life and tribal feelings. Right? In England there was a thing called jungle, which really came up as the tribal thing was there, a new kind of music. Do you think that is because there is a certain astrological change, similar? That you felt the 60s and the 90s are about the same energy. Is that?
Well, I see it. I see the hippie thing that thing as a natural thing. I don't see that as, and it's heavily repressed, and every so often it breaks out. You know.
Are you saying that if we would society run free, that again a thing like the hippie era would rise, where people would say, make love, no war?
Oh, I think if the system collapsed, which I pray for every night, that it dissolves, seriously dissolves, and it's happening, And what happens? I mean, do we need the system? We need the trains to run on time. Well, that's not a very complicated thing, but do we need all the rest of it? Or would we be better just left to do our own thing with some kind of safety net to make sure, to cover the ones that get into serious trouble?
Well, this sounds
we're very close to it now. It's not far away.
Fraser, that sounds like you are on the outside, still looking in and saying, hey guys, it's not okay, which is true. But you give the impression that changing that would be easy. Now, the people that are a little bit more on the inside, they always say, yeah, we had those ideals, but, try to make it reality because the people need a parking place and this and that, and it's very hard to organize it.
I know. Well, we're not talking about changing it. We're talking about replacing it in some level. I mean, it's got to be totally fundamental. It's not getting up so high and then tinkering, like Bill Clinton. Okay, he took acid, he smoked pot. As you say, he's up there now and he can't do anything. What is it? Does he even remember what he did? You know. So that's not the way to change it. You can't change it by burrowing your way in, because slowly you compromise yourself along the way and you forget what you started off for.
Are you compromising yourself by being editor of a respectable...
I don't think me. I think I could become president of the United States and it wouldn't compromise me at this point, because I'm old enough, I've done it long enough.
In fact, you are editor of an influential magazine about cannabis, marijuana, which has 60,000, 80,000 copies. It's growing, and it's a fat magazine. Lots of money to be made out of that market, which gives you a certain responsibility. Take the case of the pedos. What you write about it might influence the public opinion and thereby the lawmakers and so on. Yep. Aren't you a little bit on the other side yourself? Hey, you even have a jacket these days.
I don't think so.
I mean, if you wear things like Earth-Crew border removal, it also means, in a way, you adapt to the system.
Border removal? No, not saying let's have more borders. I'm saying let's remove all borders. That's not part of the system. That is the end of the system at that point. Well, if you're asking me, am I somehow selling out somewhere along the line and being co-opted by the thing? I don't think so. I think old 60s characters like me, we've been rock bottom so long that the fear of hitting rock bottom is not a big deal. I know that I would hit rock bottom. That's
true, but now, today you had a conversation with Steve Brown, one of the people we know in Holland. He was with a happy family, he made a lot of money in drugs. He is one of the big drug czars of the world. Not he doesn't do cocaine and stuff like that, but in the cannabis. He made money in cannabis. He's a big guy. He's on television, or he's going to be on television.
Yeah, starts in January.
Starts in January, with a show about criminal things. It reminds me about this guy who got into jail for the biggest train robbery in history, and he got out and he wrote a book and he made more money with that and everything.
Yeah, a great train robbery.
It seems that these guys are now selling out in a way that they are turning into the decent side, the ordinary side of things, and making money with normal activities like writing books.
Well, it depends what you write. I mean, he told me, I was talking to him today about that. He said his show, he's going to be going to Colombia the first time and trying to show some of that whole Cali cartel and the whole, he'll be actually doing informational stuff on all these things that are really important, And the more people understand, the truth will set us free. The more we actually see the information, the more everything changes. They keep this power thing by giving selected information to a very large number of people, and it's all about somehow breaking through that. Well, with the technology that helps with all that thing. And once people actually know what's going on, things will just naturally change, and thousands of...
Well, I admire your optimistic view. It reminds me of Leary, who was also very optimistic. He said, things are always changing for the better. But I see,
I'm not optimistic. I'm saying this has to happen or we are doomed. I'm not saying it's guaranteed. In fact, I don't think it is guaranteed. I'd say it's about 50-50, whether we go down the tube in the next 10 years, roughly, or whether we actually come through. And I see two forces running quite parallel here. I see a whole alternative thing getting bigger and bigger and more established and starting to do its own TV programs, and it's coming up. And I see the system falling apart, but still there and making tougher and tougher rules. And
at the same time, as people say cyberspace should be free, the old organization that take care of the copyright issues...
I see those two parallel things. Now, if this other one, us, doesn't come up and become the dominant meme, then this planet is doomed. That's how I see it.
Meme. What is a meme?
Well, like a cultural virus. A
larger idea than...
I came across a very useful concept the other day. Technophilia, and you know lots of them. You might even be one. I don't know. You tell me. Technophiliac is someone who has a naive belief that rational progress and development will solve all our problems. An immature belief, right? A technophilia. Now, I've been meeting people like this all my life.
Well, you have technophobics and you have technophilia.
That's phobia. That's being afraid.
But this is the other way, believing that technology will actually help us. Well, I don't think so.
A naive belief that somehow science itself will solve all the problems that science creates along the way. They actually have this naive belief in it. And that would probably go for most of our politicians and leading people. They actually have this belief. They're beginning to question it as things get worse and worse, and we'll get BSE now, and maybe we're going to have
that's true.
Scores of thousands of people dropping dead all over Europe, as some of the health people have been saying for I mean, the first time I heard about BSE was about 10 years ago.
BSE, that's a mad cow disease.
Yeah, it's actually in Encyclopedia Psychedelic. I checked. We covered that about 6 years ago. And they were saying that this is going to, scores of thousands of people are going to start dropping dead within the next 10 years because of this, right? Now, if we were printing an Encyclopedia Psychedelica, then the information was there, right?
But nobody saw it, or nobody took it
the people on the
serious.
top are technophiliacs. They naively believe, well, it might be true, but nevertheless, if we keep on the marketing, we keep on, it will solve it somehow. We'll find a cure, and we'll all have an injection, and we'll all be okay. You know, that's why these horrible things have happened. I understand now. It's a sort of mental, I mean, I'm a psychologist, right? It's a mental disease, a naive belief that they were taught as children, from newspapers, from parents, from everything they heard in the society they were born into. Don't worry. The system will take care of you. It's all progress and the rational thing. We're sorting it all out, you know, and all those.
But that's what fascism is. If we make ourselves believe that the system is bigger than us, so we don't have to worry, you know, some big structure will take care of it, and give the structure a uniform that's even more powerful.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
what to do against it? You edit a magazine, you write a magazine. What are the new talents? You know, you should be one of the first to see the new creative talents.
I see it everywhere. I mean, I'm very involved in rave culture, so I just see all these young people doing the most amazing things, you know, more amazing. I see the 60s completely back, and I know that's the most positive time ever, you know, when it really seemed possible. I see it now bigger, much more global. I see a very important part about youth culture now to think about is that it's not centered in the US anymore. It's not US-centric. It's global. It comes from the rest of the planet, the house culture scene. It's not dominated by America. The hippies were. All the bands came from America, except the Beatles, and that's the one everybody knows. Everything else came from America. You know, so it was all...
Well, is that true? Is that true?
Well, if you think about it, you think of name a French psychedelic star, or name a Dutch psychedelic. I mean, the Dutch were the best. They had the Provost.
Well, we have Simon Vinkenhoven.
That's right. You were the best. England and Holland were kind of the best that Europe was able to
Herman Brood is a psychedelic guy.
He's great. He's great. But in general, it was dominated by America, so all the Americans had to do, the CIA, if you want to talk about that, was somehow corrupt in America, you know, turn a few stars into junkies or make them paranoid so they jump out a window, whatever. And you've solved it, but this time they don't have that power because it's now a planetary culture, the youth.
Yeah, but is that true? I mean, if I see the movies these days, or for the last 20 years, you think those are American movies, but most of the stars are English, aren't they? Scottish, Irish.
Yeah, but that's the overground, that's the thing they control, right? I'm talking about the underground rave culture, which isn't, there's no movies about rave culture yet, it's an underground movement, far bigger already than the hippies, and yet there isn't a single star. I mean, I ask people, where I go, name me a house star from the house scene. There isn't one that everybody would agree on. Whereas with the rock and roll thing, the hippie thing and the whole world, there were stars that were created in the first 3 weeks, Elvis Presley and various others, that are still stars, right? And yet here's the rave thing been going now for, what, 8 years? Spread all around the planet, and there isn't one star yet?
But what is that? Is that a fundamental thing, or is that just lack of creativity or lack of impact?
It's full of creativity. It means that, well, it's no egos, it's far less ego-based, it's far less star-based. It's a different kind of culture which doesn't make heroes and then worship them and then buy the clothes that look like the clothes they wear. That's all going, and that's all very positive and healthy. You know, it's slowly, hopefully being replaced. It's running parallel to the overground thing, which is starting to look rocky. It's the kind of situation we're in. You know, as we sit here, we're right on the cusp of that happening, and we don't know which way it's going to go. But somehow, which side are you on? You know, that sort of thing. You know.
Fraser, do you still have fun in life?
I still do. Yeah, I have much more fun since I stopped doing clubs. I got to say, and I got to tell you, look, you got to keep asking yourself, am I actually